Hello, I'm Rowan Turrell, Partner and Head of Dispute Resolution at Boyes Turner. In early October, we held an event at the Caledonian Club in London called Embedding the in-house legal team at the heart of the business. We heard from speakers on a number of topics, with one of the panels being all about how legal teams can support ED&I initiatives within their teams and across the business. They got together after the panel had ended to reflect on their earlier discussion.
Hi, this is Andy Whittaker, Partner and Head of the Employment Team at Boyes Turner, and I am very pleased to say that I've just finished my panel session with panel members Robin Carvell-Spedding from Proteum and also Polly Tassell from CarWow. So really enjoyed the last hour or so we had talking about ED&I and supporting those initiatives in the workplace. What do you think were the most interesting things to come out of our conversation? One of my sort of initial thoughts and takeaways was just, again, what a broad topic it is. It's an obvious thing to say. We all know that. But, we talked for about an hour and we, despite best efforts, probably barely scratched the surface of some of this. We've all got our experiences, particular, probably as a result of those experiences, particular areas of focus in the sort of ED&I world as to what we want to focus on, what's in particularly important to us. But of course, there's a whole variety of other aspects of diversity, which, again, we talked about and were brought up, everything from neurodiversity to gender equality to social mobility, and linking that back into the topic of the session. I think at times it can seem, again, as maybe from the legal team where you're busy with your business as usual day job, where do you start? How can I actually make a difference there? I want to make a difference, and this is important to me, but there are going to be other areas of diversity which are important to the other people in the business. So that was one of my key areas. And it was great to hear, the stuff coming from the floor around that too. So we might be talking things on the panel, but clearly other people, as I said, have got other areas of focus too. Yeah, and how about you, Polly? What were the key takeaways for you?
I think, the broad topic, and then making sure that you're talking to everybody in the room and making sure you're getting across your, all the different diverse perspectives. I think it's really great to have Robin on the panel as well, and the energy that he obviously brings in this area in his company, and especially from a kind of traditionally more male background in the sort of companies, oil and gas companies he's working for. So it's, I think one thing I took was how great it was to hear that energy coming through.
Yeah, and I think it's really important as well that we have role models, and we have individuals who are willing to stand up, share their experiences, talk about things that haven't worked as well as they would like them to, but also talk about their successes. I know personally, I go and do training for lots of clients, and I stand up and I talk about ED&I issues, and I'm mindful of my position as being a middle-aged white man as well, middle class, I would probably say too, and therefore I'm not necessarily going to have the same shared experience as everyone in the room that I'm speaking to. But that doesn't mean that I can't be a champion, an ally for these issues, and I think it's really important that everyone does so.
Agreed. I think we talked a bit about almost self-excluding yourself in that regard. I've been guilty of that in the past. The phrase "pale male stale" comes to mind, which I now, as a result of a great ED&I session I went to last year, do not use, because I think that the risk is, either externally and also more importantly internally, you're saying to yourself, well, I can't be a part of this discussion. I can't be part of the change we want to see because of who I am, because of my experiences, which is, it's an understandable starting point at times. I think, again, there's maybe an element we talked a bit about, are people within businesses sometimes fearful of saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing. They want to be part of the change. They want to be part of the debate and taking action to improve things for everybody around ED&I. But actually, as you were rightly saying, Polly, it's become quite politicized, or very politicized in certain areas. So the risk, I think sometimes people see a bit of risk there, including at the senior level. And that's a hurdle which I think us lawyers can help overcome, A, from a risk perspective, because we like talking about risk, but B, from a sort of general perspective, well, given our position within the business sort of across, in most instances, the vast majority of the business, rather than just a few different silos, and we can sort of hopefully be that positive agent for change, as you say, Andy, by sort of role modelling what we want to do in that.
Yeah, and I often say to clients that I do accept that employment law is a complicated area. It's an area that is frequently and constantly changing. We're about to see some further changes as a result of the change of government. But if you read a lot of employment law legislation, you'll find the word reasonable popping up again and again and again, actually. And that doesn't underpin everything. But if you do find that you're treating your colleagues reasonably, and if you ask yourself the question, if this was happening to me, how would I feel about it? And maybe not just trying to take that empathetic leap. So actually not just asking, well, how would I feel in my particular circumstances if this were to happen to me, but can I put myself in the shoes of that particular individual, understand their life experiences, understand their perspective on things. If I can do that and answer the question legitimately, do I think this would be reasonable? Do I think this is a fair way of treating people? Then you're on the right track to making more good decisions than bad decisions ultimately. So people shouldn't be afraid of discussing these topics or looking to drive initiatives forwards. They just need to listen. They need to understand what their colleagues and others are saying. And if they get something wrong, they need to recognise that and apologise and learn for it and move on. But it's not insurmountable. We can all do this.
And I think we also, that point is that we all come at this from a completely unique perspective. And that was one of the things we talked about on the panel, was that every single person in the room has come from somewhere, has had life experiences that lead them to think in a certain way. Obviously, we need to challenge ourselves where those experiences have led us to think in a more closed way, but we open ourselves up to all different perspectives, which is, again, what we were talking about, how important that is in business, to have a wide range of different perspectives so that you can serve your customer base best, serve your employee base best. So I think one thing which always stems from these conversations is we can only live our own personal experience, and no one is wrong in that.
And I think maybe putting our sort of legal risk governance hats back on a bit on this point, though, I think, conversations with, I think we're talking about not just the senior people within the business, but everybody within the business, tone from the top, but tone from the middle, tone from throughout. If we need to sort of make people, I think, sit up and listen if they're not doing so for the right reasons, I think the legal, reputational, financial, retention, and all sorts of other risks are far greater if we don't talk about it than if we do and maybe do or say the wrong thing to begin with whilst we're still sort of learning on that journey. So whilst it can seem, for some, particularly who are not used to talking about it, a sort of a big scary area, I think if we can help them understand that actually in not engaging it, in not talking about it, in not putting in place the right policies, they're potentially opening themselves and the business up to bigger risks, and the benefits, the opportunities there for every risk there's an opportunity, right, are even greater.
When I provide training for clients, I often talk about engaging with HR managers or HR BPs or directors who sit there furiously agreeing with me, nodding away with everything that I've got to say. Yes, you're right. That's absolutely right. Yes, we need to do all these things. And that's fantastic as far as it goes. But unless that message is shared more widely and unless it gets buy-in through across the entirety of the business, it's not that the time is wasted, but it's so important that the message doesn't just start and stop with a particular group of individuals. Everyone needs to engage with the process.
No, I agree.
I think this is one thing which we were wanting to kind of discuss as well on the panel that perhaps we didn't spend as much airtime on as we might have liked, but is on paternity leave and role modelling of taking that. I know that that's something that you're particularly passionate about.
Yes, it is. It is. And going back to the point about, I don't like sort of stereotypical phrases like lived experiences, because I think you have an experience, it's either lived or it's not. But anyway, my lived experience around that, I guess, as you were saying, Polly, drives my particular interest and focus in this. Just sort of briefly for context, two young children, 4 and 7 going on 17. In order to have any time off with the family, when my daughter was first born in 2016, I just had to quit my then in-house contract role that I had, because we were just talking about the fact that the shared parental leave legislation, which I don't think has really changed much, if at all, since then, didn't allow me any rights around that. I was actually a contractor, had a contractor status, not a full-time employee, and my wife is also self-employed. So it was sort of a bit of a non-starter. And even actually when I looked at it, trying to digest and understand that legislation even as a lawyer is quite complicated. Through to then my son being born during the pandemic, had 4 weeks, 2 of which were annual leave. And then the statutory after that. So I think, for me, it's about, the role of working fathers in sort of modern life, modern world, for their own good, and the good of the children, the good of the family, and the good of the society. But it's the sort of second, but by no means it's even more important aspect to it, if you like, is for me a key route to gender equality. If you see men, having the ability to take the leave, whether it's parental or paternity, whatever you call it, and be actually doing so. Again, we talked about some of the positive, negative experiences we've seen around this with senior male leaders, whether they're legal or otherwise, actually using the policy that they put in place. I think then that should, to my mind, allow, as one of the key routes to a greater sense of, or greater, not just sense, but actual gender equality, both in the workplace and in wider society. Because then that will allow, I think the obvious point being, the female side of the partnership to then actually be more involved in their careers in the way they want to be, rather than having to step out for a year plus because they can only take maternity leave and the father can't take paternity leave.
I'm, first of all, so excited to be on a panel with someone that is saying these things. I've always been sort of a big supporter of paternity leave as a key driver of equality. It's a kind of yin and yang situation, isn't it? You can't have female equality and senior women mothers in the organisation if you haven't got senior male fathers that are in the organisation, because, I think, statistically, and I don't have the statistics to hand, but the proportion of women who take on the kind of main child raising after they've had maternity leave is quite significant. And I think also, again, don't have statistics to hand, but if you look at the amount of senior women in business, that's great. There is more visibility, there's more diversity. But then you look at how many of those women have children, and it is significantly lower. So in terms of that role modelling. So I think paternity leave, it starts from day one. And one thing that I always say to my friends, and have said in the past is, don't assume that your husband can't pack the bag for the day. Like, of course they can. They can pack their own bags. They can pack the child's bags. It's condescending. And if someone said that about women in the workplace, it would be, awful. So I think start from square one, make paternity leave happen so that you have an equal balance of responsibilities in the home, and it will trickle on to being equality at the higher levels and all levels of business, I think.
Well, look, we've spent the last hour or so on the panel talking about these issues, and we've just spoken again for another 10, 15 minutes. I'm sure we could speak for an awful lot longer time as well. But I think that probably brings us to the end of this brief chat. Remains for me to thank you both again, Polly and Robin, for your time this morning.
Well, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
That was Andy Whitaker talking to Polly Tassell and Robin Carvell-Spedding. Thanks for listening. If you're interested in checking out more episodes from the Boys Turner team, then please do go to our website. You can also follow or subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. Goodbye.